Ladies and gentlemen, there's a moment in every difficult connection when the script flips, when the person who once made you feel like you were asking for too much suddenly starts acting like they've been missing something all along. But it doesn't happen when you're still holding on. It happens when you've finally let go. Today, I want to talk about that moment. The one where the person you thought had forgotten you comes back, not to love you, not to build something better, but to make one final attempt to control the version of you they can no longer reach. Because when someone can't control you anymore, they don't always walk away quietly. Sometimes they make their most manipulative move right at the end, and that's what we're breaking down today. Let's begin. There's something powerful about choosing silence when everything in you wants to react. Not because you're cold, not because you don't care, but because you've reached a point where peace is no longer something you're willing to sacrifice just to feel temporarily seen. When someone has repeatedly crossed your boundaries, ignored your needs, and taken your presence for granted, they often expect a reaction when they return. They want the angry text, the emotional reply, the sudden change in your energy, because as long as you respond, positively or negatively, they still hold a thread of control over you. But when you don't respond, that thread snaps. Silence in this context isn't weakness. It's self-respect. It says, I don't need to explain myself to someone who already showed me what they were capable of. It's not indifference. It's a deeply earned clarity that not everyone deserves your energy, your time, or your attention. Especially not those who only value it when it's slipping away. People who are used to controlling you with mixed signals or emotional games will feel the sting of your silence far more than your words. Because silence forces them to sit with their own choices, it removes the distraction of your reaction and leaves them alone with the consequences they've created. They may text, call, or try to provoke you with indirect posts or guilt-ridden apologies. Not necessarily because they want to heal or take accountability, but because they need to know they can still reach you. They need reassurance that even if they messed up, they can still pull your strings, that they can still live rent-free in your emotional space. But when you've grown, you no longer feed that cycle. You don't respond out of habit or emotion. You respond only to what aligns with your values. And sometimes that means no response at all. Choosing not to respond doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough to finally protect yourself. It means you realized that explaining your worth to someone who never truly saw it is the most exhausting thing you can do. It means you've given enough chances, said enough prayers for potential, and written enough emotional paragraphs that went unanswered or dismissed. There's a quiet confidence in silence. It says, I don't chase clarity from chaos anymore. It says, I've made peace with what happened, even if you haven't. And most of all, it says, you no longer have the power to disrupt my healing. Not responding allows you to break the loop where you speak, they dismiss. You explain, they confuse. You reach out, they retreat. Every time you answer, you reopen a wound that's trying to close. But when you stay quiet, you allow that wound to scab over, to breathe, to finally begin healing in the absence of more harm. It's not about ego, it's about protecting your growth, because you can't step into your next chapter if you're constantly being dragged back into the mess of the last one. Your energy is not public property. Not everyone should have access to it just because they want it again. You get to decide who is worthy of a conversation, who has earned a reply, who has proven through action, not empty words, that they can respect the emotional world you bring to a connection. Until then, your silence is the strongest message you can send, because the moment you stop responding, they realize something has changed, that you're no longer the same version of yourself they once manipulated, dismissed, or confused. You're not playing the same game anymore. You're not seeking closure from someone who's only capable of reopening wounds. You're not trying to rewrite a story that was never meant to end with them. Your power lies in not responding, in keeping your dignity, in preserving your peace, and in walking forward, not out of bitterness, but out of self-awareness, because sometimes the greatest act of love you can give yourself is simply choosing silence. There's a unique kind of confusion that sets in when someone who hurt you suddenly returns with soft words, wistful memories, and just enough emotion to make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, this time is different. But if you look closer, you'll notice something subtle yet critical. They're not actually offering healing. They're offering hope, and those two things are not the same. Hope is easy to give. It doesn't cost much. A few kind words, a teary-eyed apology, a message at midnight that says, "I miss you," with no follow-up the next day. Hope leaves things open-ended. It stirs old feelings without offering new actions. It creates a haze that blurs your memory and your pain just enough to make you consider walking back through a door you finally learned how to close. Healing, on the other hand, requires accountability. It asks for effort. It involves uncomfortable conversations, changed behavior, and the willingness to face the hurt that was caused. Most people who walk away and then return don't come back to repair. They come back to relieve their own guilt or to regain the emotional comfort they lost. Their words are often dressed in sincerity, but their actions remain exactly the same. They might say things like, "You're the only one who ever really got me," or "I didn't realize how much you meant to me until you were gone." And in the moment, those phrases hit something deep inside. They touch the part of you that still wants to believe the story isn't over, the part that held on to the potential of what it could have been if they had just tried. But notice what's missing. Where is the plan to do better? Where is the apology that doesn't just sound poetic but takes full ownership? Where is the clarity about what went wrong and what they are prepared to change? If none of that is present, what they're really giving you is false hope, a mirage in the desert that vanishes the second you try to walk toward it. Hope without action is manipulation. It keeps you in limbo. It feeds the fantasy of change without delivering anything real, and it delays your healing by making you emotionally available to someone who already proved they couldn't meet you where you stood. There's a kind of seduction in the almost, in the what if, in the nostalgia of how things felt when it was good, and people who offer hope instead of healing rely on that. They rely on your softness, your empathy, your craving for closure, your belief in potential. They know that if they say just enough, they can stay in your heart without actually showing up in your life. It's important to ask yourself, am I feeling peace, or am I feeling the high of emotional bait? Am I moving forward, or am I circling the same block, hoping the scenery will suddenly change? Someone who is genuinely committed to healing with you will not leave things unsaid or undone. They won't just drop crumbs of affection and call it love. They'll make you feel safe, not unsure. They'll bring consistency, not confusion. They won't offer vague promises. They'll show you real, measurable change. But when someone reappears just to reignite old feelings without taking responsibility, they are not here to heal anything. They're here to soothe their own discomfort, to make themselves feel better, to see if they can still get a reaction out of you, and sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just emotionally immature, but the result is the same. You're left carrying the weight of false hope, mistaking it for progress, and that hope can be dangerous. Because it doesn't just delay your healing, it quietly convinces you to stay emotionally tethered to someone who has no intention of doing the work it takes to deserve you. The truth is, real love is not found in what someone says when they miss you. It's found in how they show up when they have you, in what they're willing to do not to get you back, but to truly grow with you. Until then, no matter how heartfelt their words seem, remember, hope without healing is not love. It's just a trap dressed in charm. Change is easy to talk about when there's nothing at stake. It's easy to make promises when the damage is already done, when the silence has grown louder, and the connection you once nurtured is now distant and unfamiliar. But real change, meaningful, lasting transformation, doesn't wait until someone walks away. It happens while they still have the chance, when they still have your love, your trust, your presence. That's when it matters most. Someone who only starts valuing you after you've pulled away wasn't valuing you to begin with. They were comfortable, they had access, they were on the receiving end of your effort, your vulnerability, your investment, and they mistook it for permanence. They believed they had time, that you'd always be there, that no matter how distant, inconsistent, or unavailable they were, you would still stay. But love is not a bottomless resource. Your patience has limits. Your heart, though deep, isn't immune to exhaustion. And when someone finally wakes up to what they've lost, it's not because they've grown. It's because the consequences have arrived. People often confuse regret with growth. They believe that the sudden ache of losing someone means they're ready to become who they should have been, but regret is reactive. It's the emotional response to loss, not the proactive desire to do better. Growth, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. It asks you to be present, aware, accountable. While you still have something to lose, true change doesn't look like an apology sent weeks later. It doesn't sound like a late night I miss you. It doesn't come wrapped in nostalgia or excuses. It shows up in the small, consistent choices someone makes when they still have access to your heart. When they could continue doing the bare minimum, but instead choose to step up, lean in, and love you better. When someone only starts to self-reflect after you've left, they're not thinking about how to love you well. They're thinking about how to get you back. There's a difference. One is rooted in accountability, the other is rooted in control, and many times the shift they present is temporary. It's driven by fear, not by depth, because it's easier to act remorseful than it is to actually become someone who won't repeat the same patterns. If someone truly wants to grow, they'll do it when staying costs them their ego, not when leaving costs them your presence. They'll recognize your value while they still have access to it. They won't need the shock of your absence to finally treat you right. The harsh reality is that some people don't take you seriously until you're gone. They don't hear your boundaries until you go silent. They don't realize your worth until they're locked out of your life. But you are not responsible for waiting around until they figure it out. Your life is not a waiting room for someone else's epiphany. Change that only happens in your absence is often performative. It's reactive. It's meant to lure you back into a dynamic where they still benefit without ever having to truly evolve. And if they weren't willing to change when they had your love, what makes you believe they'll maintain it now? The truth is, love reveals itself most clearly in how someone acts when they're comfortable, when things are calm, when they're not afraid of losing you. That's when you see their true patterns. That's when you learn whether they're choosing growth because it's right, or only because it's urgent. If you had to walk away for them to recognize your value, it means they were never truly seeing you in the first place. They were seeing what they could get. And sometimes the only reason they want you back is because they miss the comfort of being loved by someone like you. But real change, it doesn't wait until the damage is done. It shows up while the love is still alive. It listens the first time. It takes action when things feel secure, not just when they feel threatened. Because someone who genuinely wants to grow with you will never wait until they lose you to start trying. There's something uniquely disorienting about the moment someone who once withdrew their presence decides to show up again, wrapped in what looks like vulnerability. They come back with words that sound tender. eyes that look remorseful, and timing that feels almost too precise. And for a second, you pause. You wonder if they've finally understood, if they've finally grown. But often what you're seeing isn't transformation. It's a performance. It's the final move, a manipulative return disguised as redemption. When someone who has avoided emotional responsibility suddenly reappears, it rarely comes from clarity alone. It often comes from the realization that you've detached, that you're no longer emotionally available in the way you once were, that the version of you who once gave them second chances without hesitation is gone. And that shift in energy, it unnerves them, it pushes them to act, not out of love but out of fear, not out of commitment but out of control slipping through their hands. They sense it. You've stopped reaching. You're no longer checking their online status. You don't respond to their subtweets or vague Instagram stories. You've stopped sending the long messages they never acknowledged. That silence isn't just silence to them. It's a threat to their power. And so they act, but they act in a way that's rehearsed, calculated, and covered in just enough emotional dust to look authentic. They may tell you they've been thinking about you constantly, that losing you was their wake-up call, that no one ever compared, that they've changed, that they're ready now. But what they rarely talk about is the hurt they caused while they had you. They don't bring up the nights you cried, the questions you asked that went unanswered, the version of yourself you shrank into just to keep the connection alive. They skip all that and fast forward to the fantasy of a second chance. Because they're not coming back to repair, they're coming back to re-engage your emotions, to reopen a door they thought would always be unlocked. They want to see if they can still occupy space in your heart without earning their way back in. This isn't about redemption, it's about reassurance. They want to know they still matter, that they still have influence, that you're still reachable by their words, even if they were absent when it counted. And the way they deliver this final move is key. It's not grand and loud, it's subtle, it's intentionally timed. It usually comes after you've made visible progress, when your life starts to show signs of peace, joy, or independence. It comes when you're glowing again, when your silence speaks louder than any confrontation ever did. That's when they strike, because they want to interrupt that glow, not because they hate it, but because it means they're no longer the center of your world. They play the redemption card because they know you're empathetic. They know your heart is soft, even if your boundaries are firm. They remember how you used to love them, how you held space for their wounds, how you believed in the potential even when the reality was painful. And they count on that. They hope you'll see the version of them you always wished they would become, and ignore the version they showed you when it really mattered. It's not that people don't change. They can, but change isn't proven through a perfectly timed message or a tearful confession. It's proven through consistency, accountability, and respect. Most of all, it's proven when someone doesn't need to lose you to recognize your value. If they're only choosing you now that you're no longer choosing them, it's not love, it's a power play. When they come back with soft words and sudden realizations, remember, growth isn't proven in a moment of loss. It's revealed in the consistency of someone's presence while they still had you. You don't need to respond to confusion dressed up as clarity. You don't need to entertain a return that's built on regret instead of responsibility. The strongest thing you can do isn't to yell, prove, or plead. It's to stand firm in your peace, to trust what you already learned, and to remember, your silence isn't cold, it's sacred. You are no longer available to someone who only learned your value once you were no longer handing it to them. Thank you